Disclaimer before we get started. Information and examples shared in the presentation are my own views, and they don't belong to the companies or represent the companies I worked at in the past or current. So a little bit about myself. I've been in the privacy domain for about 10 years now, and started off my career in privacy QA as a lead, and involved my career into driving data privacy programs. A while ago, someone asked me what I thought about privacy, and I quickly blurted out, know what you share, protect what you know. And I went back and I reflected why I probably blurted that out. And I came to realize that I started off with myself because I guess somewhere privacy starts with oneself. That has also helped shape my career, and it has also helped transform the initiatives by shifting privacy left. And privacy for the people, by the people, really began here. This is my first time speaking at a conference, so please bear my doubts. So what's the agenda? So why is this topic about policy verification even important? Then we're going to go into demystifying some myths about privacy, some of the challenges that our teams face with regards to policy, some approaches that we could potentially use to solve those challenges in Q&A. Please feel free to ask your questions in the chat, and I will try to get to them towards the end of the presentation. So why are we even talking about privacy policy? So 5 years ago, we are all aware that GDPR was a forcing function that forced us to implement data policies. But even today, we are paying fines. And it's really something we need to ask ourselves, is it because there is not enough awareness about policies, or is it because we are not confident that the claims that we are making is valid? So something that we really need to be aware of, and which is why it's an important topic in my humble opinion. So what is a privacy policy? I really would like to get a thumbs up if you believe it's an external document. I'm not seeing any reaction, so I don't know. But moving on, I'm going to say, in my humble opinion, it's a very overloaded terminology. So there are like just several verbiages that people use with regards to privacy policy, but it is an internal document. And why is it an internal document? Because it talks about data best practices for that organization, which would be very different for different teams and orgs. For example, one team might say XYZ should be stored in PQR, only ABCs are allowed to access something. So it's very different, which is why it is an internal document. So I am talking about these two examples, which are an external policy statement, which we are going to use as a baseline for our future slides throughout this presentation to explain this policy verification process. So there are two examples here, and I want to leave you up with a food for thought. Here is, there were food for thought regarding a particular data leak that happened a couple of months ago with Salesforce community websites. Certain amount of data was accessed by unauthenticated users. Just leave that example in your mind or as a food for thought for now, and we'll come back to that in a bit. So what does that mean for me? So when you talk about policies, what is it that you need to worry about? And I would say most folks within an organization or team need to mostly focus on the internal policy, which could be very different across teams and organizations. And this is an example of how this translation might look. And it could be varied. I just have one here, verify access controls for your services, but you could also have only logged in users should be able to access data, which takes me back to that previous example that I talked about, that leak, where a leak happened, but there could have been an internal data policy that talked about only XYZ can access ABC. So that's where this is really important, something that we need to really be aware of within organizations. So moving along, this topic is, why do we continue to see challenges? Why is that? It's because a lot of times business needs are constantly changing, and so is the resourcing of around that. And so teams really don't necessarily all the time know why and how, what needs to be done. There's lack of awareness, there's not enough information, and when and how this needs to be done is a question that I guess a lot of teams have. And so what can we do about it? And so I believe there is scope for embedding policy verification within a product lifecycle or a system lifecycle. And this is industry agnostics. It can be done across any industry, in my opinion. And the first step really is this look, ask approach. Whenever you are getting to a requirements phase, ask if there is a policy out there. Is there an internal one? If there is none, ask what about, do we even have a policy? Ask now. Secondly, during design and development, write out whatever you need to verify or validate. Going back to the previous slide about that internal data policy, if you are coming up with a feature, how is it going to impact the test scenario? Write that out now. If you don't have one, even then, write it now. And lastly, fix the issues you see, create and update new policies at this stage, and repeat the cycle. So how can this policy verification help? Again, with an example. So let's start with an example about the 3P interaction collection. There was an internal data policy that talked about ensure that data stores do not store 3P URLs linked to user ID, if you remember. I really wanted to see some reaction around how many of you do think that there is a problem here? I do not see reactions, unfortunately. So I am going to say the answer is maybe. You don't know until you ask. So the first step where this verification will help is asking. Is this okay? Maybe not. What if I was this person? Would I be comfortable if like a whole bunch of 3P URLs are collected about me? I think that's where I would say for the people begins. Second is fix it. Fix if there's a problem. Third is improve it by the people is where here it is. Make sure that someone else is not asking the same question, or it can be helpful to someone else and you made a difference. So ensure that data stores and logs do not store 3P URLs linked to a user ID could be an improvement. And there's always room for improvement all the time. So this is where I emphasize by the people is valid, and then rinse, repeat. Rinse this whole cycle. You don't know what you will uncover all the time. So what are some of the key takeaways and benefits? I'm going to say that it is definitely possible to embed policy verification within system lifecycle, and it really encourages a shared responsibility. And in addition to, don't want to repeat each of these notes, but it is definitely a mechanism for an internal privacy audit that will help to prevent external audit issues. So we have better controls in place because of this process, and we are better prepared for any type of auditability. I guess I finished really quickly, so happy to take questions. So I have a question here. How have you seen policy verification process embed into product lifecycle? Yes, I have been involved in this process. So it is a mechanism where you will embed this. I can go back to the slide. Sorry. Here at the requirements phase. So if you are looking through a feature requirement or a new feature that is being conceptualized or even being developed, at that time you can figure out whether or not there's a policy. Mostly at the data collection level is what I would encourage people to begin looking at policies. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question? Yes, this can definitely scale. That's why I say that this is a shared responsibility model. It starts with people within the company. Everyone is responsible for this. So anyone who is building a feature needs to look at it. It cannot be one team's responsibility, or it cannot be legal's responsibility, in my humble opinion. Everybody needs to be aware of this, and definitely privacy champions need to take a lead role in making sure that this can scale. And this can also, once you have these, I guess, processes in place, it is possible to automate some of them via tooling. Yeah. I have scaled this via privacy champions, Liz. And most of my privacy champions for this verification were QA leads across different organizations, if that helps set a little bit more context. I guess if there are no other questions, I can end the session. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining once again.